Hi, I want to make a video on selling personal lies as truth and how your lies do nothing to change the truth. Like I mentioned before, believing in something, a mystery that's happening on the planet, doesn't change the fact of what's really happening because that mystery exists nowhere but here as a concept that doesn't actually exist out there. Even though you know the truth, you're going to claim there's a mystery beyond that truth, even though there's no mystery beyond that truth. So that mystery is just a word of a concept that doesn't have much meaning except ethereal wind dust that doesn't mean much of anything. When you know the reality, you know the general, I mean, especially when you know the facts have been thrust in your face so much, you just decide to ignore them. They exist regardless of your perception of them. It exists regardless of what you want to believe. And especially when you know you're lying and you're deliberately lying about the facts and you're selling it as the truth, it doesn't change the truth, motherfucker. The truth is still exactly the truth. And the truth hasn't changed. Time changes. Change is happening. But the truth doesn't change. The interaction, the fundamental nature of existence doesn't change. What changes is my finger is here, now it is here. I can say, I can't describe exactly the process of this to this. I can just say, this happened. This to this happened. You can say, well, you didn't describe exactly every little photon, this, that, and the other thing, times the speed of light squared, this, that, 100 million, trillion, billion, trillion, but then a trillion infinity not can explain. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. This to this is all it needs to be explained. I don't know why, because reality describes itself. It doesn't need you to describe it because you're describing it with words. And just because words can't describe it doesn't mean existence doesn't exist in one way. And it's existing through movement and change, mechanical processes that are existing. And just because you can't describe every single circumstance, at least as far as you know, you're perceiving every single circumstance. Even if you can't see the atoms, you're seeing the thing that's causing the atoms, because the atoms are the hand, like the tornado that's spinning around. The atoms are causing the function of the tornado. You can't describe everything, but says who, you're describing it just by sensing it and experiencing it in reality. You're part of the reality, you're part of the moving function, the moving interaction, therefore you're existing in it. And it doesn't take in, like our words, they're nothing more than a part of that function itself. It's not really describing anything, it's just part of the function. It's about describing between as ideas and changing those ideas, which mean more than the person having the idea, and spreading that idea around, because the idea in the end is the thing that's going to change something. The idea, it takes the idea for the person to change something. And that's where the idea comes from, is the idea needs something, and that's an idea itself. Um, so yeah, I mean, the mystery, the lies, the magic, yeah, they're doing something, but even if something was happening, if something was happening, even the lie, not to be true, obviously you know it, therefore your mystery lie doesn't mean anything except you know it's trying to make you feel good. But then again, you can have that lie, but just don't sell it as philosophy when you know it not to be the truth. You can say, that's stupid, I'm going to believe this now. But when I'm talking philosophy, okay, I'll have to discuss the truth, okay. But when the truth is no longer important is when I'm having my little fantasy. You can go to sleep, imagine all sorts of wacky things. The fact is, first of all, the wacky things don't exist, but if the wacky things did exist, what are those wacky things going to do? There's fairies floating around. Okay, I can touch the fairy. Ooh, I can diddle the fairy. Ooh, there's little things in the light bulb. Guess what? The light bulb still functions the same way. And if things were magically happening, they'd be functioning a different way. But you know it's a lie anyway, so therefore you're just lying about the facts that you know to be true. You're not going to point to the fairy when, the light's turning on and off. You're just going to point to the light switch and the light bulb turning on and off. There's nothing else happening. You can apply it like there's an invisible fairy, or if it's a visible fairy, might as well be no fairy. So like the mystery, if there's no mystery, why would there be a mystery? The mystery is about solving the mystery. And once you solve the mystery, what's the point of having a mystery if it's not to be solved? The mystery is there to be solved, and once you solve the mystery, there's no longer a mystery to be solved. The only mystery that we exist in is the mystery of existing going forward, not knowing what's going to happen the next day. And generally speaking, the thing that we're going to be anticipating are negative events that are going to be happening. That's the only thing that there is to anticipate is problems that we're going to have. Well, what am I going to eat tomorrow? I'm going to cook first. I might pour boiling water on my hands. I wonder if that's going to happen. I can't wait to narrowly escape my face being, burned alive after the stove catches on fire. Yeah, I can't wait. Yeah. I narrowly escaped. Yeah, I got a little rush out of that, and I'd appreciate, oh, life's so grand because I escaped near-death experience of burning alive. Yes. Oh, it feels so good. We're leaving. Yeah, no sale. No sale, motherfucker. Sorry. that's the case. That's the way it is. So yes. So yeah, no fairies in the light. Sorry, there's no fairies in that light. No, there's no ghosts floating around, because obviously they'd be floating around. But if you can't say it or describe it, then they're not floating around. They might as well, if they are real and they're invisibly floating around doing nothing, they might as well not exist to begin with, right? Sort of like the invisible, unicorn behind you that only exists when you're not looking. You can't hear it or anything. It just only exists when you're not looking. And it only makes noises, and you can only see it when you see it, but you can't see it unless it's behind you, but you can't see behind you once you look at it, because once you look at it, it doesn't exist. No, screw you. It doesn't work that way. You're just saying, you're conceding it doesn't exist then. So if you're just going to go around that bullshit way of, a roundabout bullshit way of saying it does exist, just to end up saying it doesn't exist, you might as well just say it doesn't exist, because that's all you're saying. Just say it doesn't exist. Don't do bullshit. Just say, yes, you're right. Yes, that's right. Yes. I come to a consensus. I understand what you're saying. I understand enough to say that you're right. I understand you enough to say that you're right. So let me come to a consensus and say you're right. Then let me find a better way to describe my circumstance than trying to misconstrue what you're saying, so that you don't understand what I'm saying and I don't understand what you're saying. Concede that, okay, yes, you're right. I get the point. Let me make a few corrections. Instead of me saying, oh, yes, I believe you, but this, no, don't say yes. Don't say that. You're right. Let me make a few corrections. Okay, what I really mean by this is, and this, instead of just constantly disagreeing and going around a roundabout way to make it even more complicated. That's no way of getting across an argument. Okay, yes, I concede your points. Yes, I concede your points. And then let me explain how we can change the language to make it seem like what I was saying earlier wasn't, especially when I was agreeing with you to begin with, not seem as much like a disagreement that you thought I was having with you. And that's a good way of dealing with these arguments. Instead of making things go on and on and on, find a way to concede a point, then find a better way to articulate the point, especially when the point was never disagreed upon to begin with. It was just a misunderstanding. And then the person may end up you might end up confusing the person into believing exactly what you're accusing them of, even though that's not what they're believing, and you just end up getting more angry at them. I see this a lot between arguments on people on YouTube, obviously. Someone, big in the atheist community, antinatalist community. I see this a lot, especially when you don't necessarily know where you're coming from. But then again, yeah, it's just dealing with people needs to be a little more precise, especially when you don't necessarily know where you're coming from. And just because you know a person for years doesn't mean you weren't having the right argument. Doesn't mean you were having the right argument to begin with. It can have been just the relationship started off bad and end up going that way. And especially when it's yeah. And just to avoid that, I'm mentioning Amendum and how he interacts with certain people. And I think it's best to understand exactly what's going on. And if the person is disagreeing with you, that's when you say, yes, I know you're disagreeing with me. Now I know I can attack you. I know I'm going to try my best way to attack you and convince you. And at that point, once you realize that you realize you're both on opposite sides, then at that point, if you're not just automatically agreeing and it's about getting to a consensus and conceding a point, if it's not just a misunderstanding, then once you realize what they're saying and you know what you're saying, then I think you'd better convince someone that way when you both understand that you're either disagreeing or agreeing. Because if you're both agreeing, then there's no disagreement. But if you're both agreeing, and you make corrections after that about how to describe it, semantics and all that. But if you're disagreeing, you can know exactly more where you're coming from with that disagreement. So that's always a good way to come from. It's always a good way to come from. It's just a recommendation, whatever. It's a good way to convince people. But whatever, that's besides the point. Yeah, but I mean, this magic thing, yeah, snap your fingers, it appears. Guess what? I snapped my fingers and things moved around, little air, dust particles. Is that magic? I mean, I went over this in the previous week. It's not magic. Sorry. Too bad. Tough luck. I mean, whatever. It's life. And life explains itself. You're in life right now. You know exactly what's going on. You know what's making you comfortable and uncomfortable. And you know the truth, and you know that the lies you're telling yourself aren't even convincing you, because you know that those are lies and you're just using them to try to make yourself feel more comfortable. It doesn't change the facts. They exist regardless of what you want to believe or not believe. So yeah, they don't change, and if they were real, they'd be representing themselves in reality. since you know, especially when you lie and they're intentional, you're lying for what reason? To make something you can just have it to yourself. You're trying to make that philosophy when you're lying that and selling it as truth in an argument, even though you know yourself it's not true. That is not good. That's bad. And that shouldn't be happening. That you shouldn't use that as a mechanism. Find something else. Separate that silly that fantasy from reality. Reality exists on a different level than fantasy, because fantasy is all in here. Reality exists. But fantasy can come from things out here, and you just mix them up differently. You just change a few things here, and all of a sudden it's fantasy. You imagine a different outcome, it's reality, but it's not reality the way it's going to happen. It's your projection. That's a projection. That's where all this stuff comes from, is projection. But like I said, our projection is all we have. So the imagination exists. These things outside and the things that we apply to them, the things that we want to apply to as facts, don't exist outside of this. And this is where most of these things, all these things exist, are the fantasies. And that's all where all these things, fairies, except on the television screen, they mean nothing, but those things that are fake came from somewhere up here, and they're projecting them out into the world. It doesn't mean much beyond that. So yes, it's easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Nothing more, nothing less. So your personal lies, especially when someone else just can come up and create another personal lie. You know, it's just a bunch of lies. It's lie fest. Lie, lie, la. It's just pointless lying, pointless delusion, disillusionment, illusions. And just don't even bother. Just accept it and just move on. Okay, I'm gonna live my fantasy when I'm in my bedroom, but when I'm in the bathroom, that's when reality. I mean, I'm gonna argue some reality then, boy. I mean, when you eat, you're living reality. That's the part of reality. It forces you into it, not just biologically, but reality explains itself. You need to eat. You accept that. You can say you don't have to eat, but you're gonna eat anyway. What you say doesn't mean shit. What you describe doesn't mean shit. It's just another interaction. Saying something, that's all, it doesn't mean anything. I just said everything in the world. I said the meaning of life, doesn't mean anything. It's just contrivance and applying something that doesn't really mean anything. I could have said the meaning of the world. There's no meaning to this, anything except the value, and the contrivances mean absolutely nothing. Because the word meaning is just another thing to describe a contrived situation. It's just another interaction. It doesn't mean much of anything. But there is a reality, and that this thing is just part of the reality. There's one reality happening. Continuous movement that's existing. And it doesn't mean it's not happening. It's just this description doesn't mean much anything. When you're describing something inside the game, it doesn't mean anything. Because you're describing inside the game. You're not describing the game outside the game. You can describe chess and how it works, the rules, but you can't, and you can try every single move because it's something that's based on these rules inside something else. But when it comes to the fundamental nature of reality and discussing philosophy and value and the facts of hard reality, you can't describe it using words to be precise as possible inside the game itself. When you're talking about the universe as a whole and the fundamental nature of existence, you can only do so much to describe it entirely because the description is inside the universe and the description is coming from inside the universe. Its existence. And there can't be anything outside the existence, or like fortune telling, you can't fortune tell. You can only base off of possibility and probability inside the game. And there's nothing more to that existence. You can't foretell the future. You can't do anything like that unless you're outside. There's no outside, therefore you're on the inside, and you can only project so much. And that's existence. So I mean, that's really it. There's nothing more to discuss in this. Yes, I'm looking at myself. It's hard not to look at yourself sometimes in the camera. It's like, hey, wait, how do I look from that angle? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. You see, I still get caught up on those stupid things. Oh, how do I look here? Oh, yeah, look at that. Yeah, this doesn't mean anything. It's like, oh, yeah, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It means something. Oh, I feel good. Yeah, I feel good. It's like, okay, to feel bad. It doesn't feel good. It's, yes, I feel good. I know, and the bad things mean something. That's, it doesn't mean shit. It's avoiding a negative, and it doesn't mean anything anyway, because it's avoiding a negative. It's fleeting, and it's just a feeling. It's just a little buzz. It's electricity, almost like a little buzz. It's vibration, tickles. That's all it is. It's because it's futile. It's fleeting. It relies on a negative. and the fact that it's just a little ooh, intangible nothing. It's ooh, temporary. Now I'm gonna feel like shit. Yeah, let's do it again. No. 1 second of good. 1 second. Ah, 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 ah. Eh, 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 eh. That's all. 1 second of good, 1 second of bad. Oh, well, it depends how much you go between good and bad at that point. I'm going good and bad every second, but okay, I'm going to choose the different style and down to 5. Now it's instead of 10, it's yeah, it's a little better, it's a little different, right? Yeah, it's still the same mechanism. There's a difference. There's a relative. You're good than bad. That's all that's happening. Okay. Anyway, yeah. Light's the light. You can describe it however you want. Doesn't mean anything. Arbitrarily describe it as something very general like magic, but once you do it, it just starts meaning nothing. It's about creating this web of knowledge and using words to describe it as best we can mutually between different people that can understand it and describe it and get something across, because this philosophy we're using, this knowledge we're using is about even hard science. The hard science that we're using is to figure out something to make this sentient thing feel better. So we're using a hard science to help understand the hard science. We're figuring that hard science out to not only understand it, to make the sentient being more satisfied with understanding the universe and all that, but also to make the sentient philosophy thing be more satisfied. So we're using hard science to make the sentient value thing, philosophy, have more, have better interaction, to create better value and affect the sentient being more than anything. So yeah, it doesn't mean your lies, especially if it represent itself. It doesn't mean anything. It's just crap. It's a lie. It's detrimental. It creates worse things, generally speaking, for as far as we know. It creates a worse circumstance, generally speaking, as far as we know. It doesn't do anyone any good. It delays not only the truth, inevitability of the truth, but delays the good that can happen. And generally speaking, the good would have been better. And just because something could be good because of something happening bad happening, doesn't mean it couldn't have been a better way. And just because it happened this way doesn't mean it couldn't have happened better. It could happen better regardless. It's just because it was predetermined to happen a good way or this way, doesn't mean it couldn't have happened a better way. And doesn't mean that this outcome always automatically leads to a better outcome. It could have happened a better way, even if it isn't going to happen a better way. It already happened, and you can make it. Once the negatives happen, it's going to happen. And, if you didn't need the negative to begin with, why experience? Why you're learning your lesson to prevent further mistakes from being made from that lesson happening again when you didn't have to learn the lesson to begin with? Why go through the pain or the deprivation when you don't have to go through the pain and deprivation to begin with? You're going through the pain and deprivation to prevent that pain and deprivation from happening again. But why go through that when obviously you're going to have to a certain extent in life, when you didn't have to go through it to begin with? So that's the thing. Why go through it when you didn't have to go through it to begin with? The basic idea. Okay, so yeah, your lies do nothing, especially when it doesn't mean anything. It's stupid and silly. So that's all I really need to say about the subject. It's lying and stuff and all that. People lying. And not only lying, but falling for delusions and confusing themselves and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, people fall for their own bullshit in many cases, so it's regardless of the facts. Just make sure you understand each other more than anything. It's always a good idea. So thank you, and if I have anything else to say on the subject, I'll mention it. So thank you, and until next time.